Yeah, baby, we back in it. It's Blue42 podcast. Welcome back to episode 2. It's your boy Rad out here in Rip City, Portland, Oregon. Big repping those Detroit Lions, and we just dropped those new Honolulu Blue helmets, baby. But I got my guy, Young Simba, the host that does the most. Dose, what's up, baby? Tell me how you feel about the reveal of the new old school helmets, baby. Alternate helmets. I'm sorry. The new alternate helmets by our Lions. How you feel about them?
Yep. Okay, well, I actually have a question. I don't know if you can answer this.
Wait a minute. You can't answer a question with the question. I asked you a question.
Yeah.
Let's start Blue42 off right.
All right.
Dose,
my bad.
How you feel
but this was a legit
the new helmets? he jumps right into a question. Bro, I just asked you a question.
I think this question is necessary though. To okay, you know what though? Let's just take the helmets for what they are then. I think the
oh
color.
My god.
See, in my time as an artist, when I used to
never
paint
an
and
artist.
Stuff,
No.
One thing I used to teach my students was like the color palettes as important as the person doing it.
First off,
what they really got from
you know what?
experience.
First off, you never had any students. You're not old enough to have any students, okay? You just turned 21. You're
never old enough to learn.
Folks, he has no students, and y'all should know this.
Okay.
Second, he ain't no artist. When was he painting? Talking about he's Bob Ross now. How do you feel about the helmets? I think they're fire.
And that's what I'm saying. So I think the color palette is fire. I'm just looking at it right now. I didn't even realize the first time around that the face mask was gray. That looks good. I mean, I could break it down because I'm an artist, but I want to throw it to you. Give you the opportunity. So for anybody that's just listening and can't see it, like, how would you describe this so they can get a mental image of what it looks like?
I mean, I think it has a old school feel because it is an old school logo, but it's got that booming Honolulu blue with the silver helmet, with the silver face mask. I'm sorry. The helmet is Honolulu blue with the silver face mask. I think it's fire. And if I think they need to flip them. When they throw those helmets on, I think they need to wear the all blue unis.
Yes.
Or the all gray unis. That's the only way I think it can be rocked. You can't rock it with the white and blue, blue and white, blue and silver, nothing like that. You need to do one straight solid color for the uni and throw it on.
So it's apparently, according to ESPN, the Lions will wear the helmets with their all gray alternate uniforms. So them color rushes.
I like that.
Do we like the blue with the gray? Because or should it have been like to what you said, if they rocked all blue with the blue helmet? Because now it's going to be like all blue and then the gray helmet.
You know what? This is what I think is going to happen.
Or all gray with the blue helmet. My bad. Yeah.
I think they're going to start with like that all gray with the blue helmet. But we're going to be such a hot NFL team this coming season. They're going to do what they want.
Ooh.
They're going to put that blue helmet on with those all blue unis. You might see us. We might around and wear the all white unis with the blue helmet. Like we winning so many games, because when you're winning games, you can do whatever you want.
We make the rules. That's what
100%. Okay. It's us versus everybody.
Well, look, man, I like it because I like that old school logo. The one logo, like if I had to rank them, like the three main ones, the one that we got now, and they changed kind of the outline. I love that's my favorite one. And then they had the one right before they detailed it. I can remember like before they detailed
it. Like that 90s logo.
Yeah, I didn't love that because
I don't like that logo.
Everybody thought the head of the lion, or 90% of people thought the head of the lion, the two arms were his mouth.
I always thought that. I didn't know it was any different up until like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. The two legs. Yeah, I always thought it was his mouth and like, but really those are his legs and his head sits above those like the whole time. That was a terrible little logo.
Took a big jump with this but I like the old school one. Like I like how it has like the two lines behind it. It definitely gives you the old school feel. I rock with it. It's clean. I just like the blue. I like the gray face mask the best. I like because like from in my days when I was a player, what happened was
we got it. Why we couldn't stay on track. We couldn't stay on track. I like it because back in the day we were winning games too with that logo. So let's bring some of that juju to this current age and let's win some football games, make the playoffs, NFC Championship, lose next year, 2024. We win the Super Bowl. I'm done.
I don't like how you're doing that. You did this last episode too, real quick. You did this last episode. You're putting that energy out there that we're losing the NFC Championship. Because I know, I'm telling you right now, Brad, when we get to that NFC Championship game, we're going to do a show, and you were not going to be saying we're losing this one because everybody's going to know. They know would say we're losing that game.
You know what?
There's not going to be one person in that stream predicting a loss.
You have a solid point. Because when we do a show, you're right, and we're in the NFC Championship, I'm gonna be talking about we winning. You're right.
Quick though, to that point of the helmets, definitely go check them out if you can't see them. But it's the Raiders this year, which is a Monday Night Football game at home, and then also against the Vikings, which is the final game of the season. I think that one's to be determined though, in terms of when they play that one. So they should look good, you know. But anyway, so what we're gonna do, man, we're gonna dive into the defense today. It's kind of an expansion of what we did last episode. We had a couple of you guys sent emails to doseofgaming@gmail.com. Feel free to keep sending those in if you guys want us to touch on something. One of them was about, do it, please. But one of them was about adding a specific player, which we'll touch on later. And I think it was defense that I wanted to do like a full episode on. I just wasn't sure how it was going to go down. And I don't know. I can't say this will be the last one because I'm sure I'll come back to it again. But I think it's a good time to just talk through how we feel these pieces are going to go together for this Lions defense, because as I was telling Brad before we started this, it feels like over the last few years, like every year you kind of think things are going to change. I know me and Brad are on the same page. We expect some potential differences in the back end because we do have different pieces and you have to adapt to those. And I'm okay, this is off topic real quick, but I was thinking about this. I wrote this note down to give like Brad credit at one point because I was listening to a different podcast talking about the changes that they had to their franchise or their front office and how quickly, like when you turn things over, it can be difficult to gain that trust if you don't win right away. And for the Lions, they didn't win right away because of what, they were going through. But to their credit, I think you have to give them credit in the sense that they didn't really immediately push people out like at any level. We can tell from the outside, right? So there's certain guys that are still there working with them. But then also you could say the same thing about their players as well. When you talk about the cornerback position, having Okudah, having Amani, they gave them their shot. And then as we saw this past season, it just wasn't up to par. So now they can kind of move off of that. But they gave guys opportunity, I feel like, across the board for the most part. You can point to that. So I'll give him credit for that.
Josh Pascal should be not starting, but he should be playing week 1. Hopefully Levi, I know everybody didn't forgot about Levi, our second-round draft pick from a couple years ago. He should be playing week 1. Romeo should be.
I don't know about that.
No,
I know because
we're going to talk that into existence.
I don't
talk
right.
that.
I should keep.
We need him back.
You're right.
You know what I mean? So it's like a lot of pieces are being added to this defense that we truly didn't have last year. Romeo, Charles, Levi, Broderick, the new rookie, 3rd-round D tackle, and plus the young gunners are going to be in their 2nd and 3rd years. So I think we're going to be much improved. But let's kick it off. Go ahead, Dose.
I want to make a quick point. I'm not trying to bring bad energy, but to anybody that did see it, because I did see this.
I did too.
They were showing some Levi stuff, and they're like, "This is where he's at," and how Aaron Glenn was saying, "Like, we're trying to get him
hopeful.
Healthy. We're not really even worried about him playing. We're just trying to get him healthy at this point." So,
bro, like,
look, man, you guys were on a line to like get off the train, basically, which it seems backwards, but you guys were on that line. I wasn't getting on that line yet, but that's
a back,
right?
It's a back injury.
That's what Glenn said. It's the back. It's about getting healthy for him. So, like, I feel like the Lions, and we're going to talk through this, I can almost vision a lot of this without putting him in there because I feel like if you have to say, like, oh, he's got to do this year, then you could be in some trouble. And that was something we talked about before the draft even hit. And we didn't have that much information then about where Levi was at. But I was like, hey, if you go into this draft and you draft as if, like, we expect Levi to be this year, I don't think you should do that. Like, you got to almost attack this offseason like you're not going to have Levi. And then if he can, it's great news. It's fantastic news. And then hopefully he improves as through the season. Getting in my bag a little bit about Vic Fangio because, well, first off, let's start here. We picked up CJ Gardner-Johnson this offseason. And I know that's a guy that we always bring up. And we do all the time in streams. And it feels like the guy that as Lions fans, we always like comp to, like, oh, if we could find our CJ Gardner-Johnson, that piece. And last year, like, we were scrambling trying to find that. We addressed it sort of with Mike Hughes, but no one really stuck there until Will Harris took over that position. But now that we've added that piece that's always looked at as the example, I think the other example to go to in terms of like how the pieces can go together, I had to look back at that Vic Fangio style, who's now the defensive coordinator of the Dolphins. He's been great everywhere as a defensive coordinator. And just looking at how he's done it in the past. How has he built defenses? What has been the priorities? What similarities do you see? And then just like what the question I was almost looking at to answer what we're going to talk about, the Jack Campbell pick, and trying to make theories on maybe why the Lions went that direction. Because I know for me, I was way off. I didn't think we'd even. I was like, hey, we might not take a linebacker till day 3 if we even take one. And they took one round 1, so I was just standing there shocked. Like I didn't expect that. And we'll talk about that. But I think when you talk about putting the pieces together and where he's been and just the way that he's done it and kind of what that defense is known for, does that apply to what we've think about with Aaron Glenn's defense? And will that start to apply with an Aaron Glenn defense starting this season based on now it feels like, vets in the back end, proven pieces, but also it's year 3. Like, Brad, I wrote this down. I want to get your thought on this real quick, and then we'll get into it.
Go ahead.
I wrote down, I think Aaron Glenn is on a very hot seat in the sense that this thing could really go 2 ways for him. Either number 1, the Lions defense does improve and you're like, oh man, they were missing some pieces, which is legit. And I do believe that it's going to take a big step forward this year. And if that's the case, we talk about Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn's had interest for the last 2 years. And it's like the defense hasn't even statistically done that well if you just look at a full season. So you have that. And then there's the flip side where it's like, well, hey, if this thing doesn't come together and it's bottom of the league again, and if the offense holds their own, you're going to be looking back like, wait a minute, 3 years into this hasn't taken a step. Now all of a sudden he's in the hot seat to me immediately because it's like, well, shoot, we got to do something here. Like we can't keep doing this. So I feel like this is a big varying opportunity for Aaron Glenn in terms of this could be great for him. Next job, it seems like he wants a head coaching job, or this could be really bad for him really fast. What do you think about that?
So for Aaron Glenn, I think it is a make or break season to your question there, because we've brought in pieces on the back end. Defensive front, I feel like, I don't want to say we're loaded, but we're deep with a lot of good talent. Talking linebackers, we brought in a first round. We re-signed a veteran to a long-term. Malcolm played well. Barnes is coming into his own, they say. So this is a make or break year for Aaron Glenn. If we boom on defense, I think the Lions win 11 plus games, which is great for our team. And then Aaron Glenn probably will be leaving because, to your point, he has been getting interest in head coaching jobs and things like that. If it does, I think he's fired. Because at this point, we fired Aubrey Pleasant, brought in a bunch of veterans. We got CJ, Cam, Emmanuel. We go get Branch. T-Walk's coming back. Herbie's into a sophomore year. So I feel like if we dud at this point, I think, I hate to say it, but we may let go of Aaron Glenn. I'd love to keep our whole coaching staff intact. I didn't want anybody to leave. Deuce, he is on the hot seat, because if we dud, he's gone. If we boom, I think he's going to get a head coaching job, and at that point, we probably promote within. We signed and drafted 2 people I've been wanting. I wanted Brian Branch in the draft, and I've been wanting CJ for about 2 seasons at this point. I wanted us to trade for him before Philly, so I think we will improve, but it is a hot seat for Aaron Glenn.
Like Dan Campbell, that's his boy. Like they came over from New Orleans,
right? So
he's like. And I do remember when they first signed these corners, it just kind of sounded like, well, these guys, they didn't say they were going to start, but it was like kind of known.
Cam started. He getting paid too much not to start.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure.
Mosley, he got to probably grind for it, but I think he has the up on Jerry Jacobs. He's a veteran. He has good tape. Mosley, honestly, I think is going to be our best corner if he comes back truly healthy.
Right.
Go ahead. My bad.
No, I agree. I'm with you. I think if Mosley's healthy, he'll start for sure. Let's start with that connection, I think, to that background. And the reason I brought that up is I was talking with you yesterday, Aubrey Pleasant. We brought him in, and that was something that Aaron Glenn has said all the time. Every time they bring in a coach, it feels like they talk about, man, he's from the same tree. He looks at it the same way. We do it a similar way. And then you talk about, of course, we had Dom Capers as an assistant here for us, like a senior consultant or assistant for Lions, and his connections, his background, how they were tied together with Vic Fangio as well. And they always talk about they come from the same idea of how they do things defensively. And I'm looking at these draft picks. We're going to talk Jack Campbell, trying to make sense of it because I was shocked, but I tried to understand, okay, well, what's the vision really here? Because Malcolm did play well last year and then they re-signed Alex, so it didn't feel necessary. And then we know how much teams are in sub package now. It's like, that's your main package. 70% of the time you're sitting in that. So I think when you look at the schematic side, one thing that I came across, and I think we all think this, when you think of Vic Fangio defense, you think about the 2 high safeties. I remember that was something that we talked about a ton. A lot of zone. Yes. Yeah. Like, you remember when we first brought in Aubrey Pleasant, I remember talking about oh man, all this stuff they do, post snap, and how that was implemented, with the play action. defense turns his back and something looks different defensively. And I think we've seen that, kind of creating like almost that umbrella that he creates where he has like that idea of doing it. But post snap is where you get all the movement. So you need those versatile safeties or run support safeties. You look at the guys that he's worked with. I think we throw in Brian Branch, the Gardner Johnsons, those guys that can support in the run. The run fits are built around defending the pass. So this was interesting. So I know I sent you some of my notes. You couldn't read them. I mean, I blame you a little bit more for that than my handwriting. If everybody knows as an artist, there's a certain like twist I put to my lettering. That quote stuck because the run fits are built on defending the pass. We know today it's all about passing. So I was thinking about that. Like, how does that make sense? Well, the light boxes. So this is something that I didn't really know was such a big staple of a Vic Fangio defense as much as it is. And we talk about, playing sub packs, things like that. But this guy is like, he's like the king of that. He's the king of playing 6 dudes in the box. You look back when he was with the Bears, they had the highest rate of it at one point. Like, he's the king of playing light boxes, getting that extra defender, randomly threw it out there. Like the idea of like, oh, hey, you could just get that guy that can free up a gap potentially for a player to stop a opposing quarterback that can run. And he's like the king of light boxes, one less defender. But because of that, he needs guys that could take on a little bit more responsibility. So the final point that I'll make, and I want to get your thoughts on what you think of this, they had a term for it. Okay, I always hear about the 1 gap. You hear about the 2 gap. Well, how about Vic Fangio's gap and a half, Brad? Not playing the 1 gap like you normally do, but it's almost like squeezing into a second one so you can support. So for them, they did a lot of, they had their 3 tech like we have, like Levi was drafted to be, and now I think it's going to transition into Aleem, the 2-way go kind of guy. But then they had their nose tackle, but he's not like specifically, just like your pure, 2-gapping defensive line across the board, because he's trying to get some support as well, because they're asked to play the gap and a half. And you do that with your other defensive line, where I throw the Josh Pascals into that mix as well. And that's why you have to get some size at linebacker. So we'll start there, Rad. What are your thoughts about, kind of that idea defensively? Because I think it ties in perfectly to what we talked about last show.
Gap and a half is where your D-line just can't. They're playing their primary gap, but you just can't play like super out of control just in case you need to get to that other gap. So we need you to defend that first gap, but if things change up, we kind of need you to get back where you need to be. And I think that's honestly where our rookie, Broderick, may fire off high, but he's good at controlling his initial gap. But if things switch up, he can get back to the other gap, which I like. We're going to play a lot more zone this year. I really, truly do, because Mosley and Cam Sutton, they come from like a zone background to play a lot of 2 high safeties. We're playing to where we're not giving up the big play. Right. That's where Vic Fangio's defense really is. Don't give up the big play. Keep everything in front of you. Rally to the ball and make the tackle. I think that's what we're trying to get, because these past couple of years, we've been playing a lot of man, majority of man. We did switch it a little bit towards the second half of the season, but Okuda wasn't best at playing his zone and things like that. Now we're bringing in more zone-based corners, and everybody we're adding to this defense are good tacklers too. Let's take note of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not saying our last year's defense wasn't the best tacklers. I think our corners did a really good job at tackling, but we're adding better tacklers to this current defense we have.
The point that you just made, I had actually one of my stats. I have so many papers everywhere, but we'll talk about zone more in a second. But one stat that I have, I can read.
Can you read those papers?
I put the little, I like to put the little
what? Quotations? Parentheses?
Ooh, parentheses. Yeah, I like to put those around it, like box it in, because then I'm like, that's important. You know what I'm saying?
I've seen that, but I couldn't read it.
Here's one of the stats that I had too, the light box look, right? So in 2020, this is back with Fangio when he was with Denver. 77% of the time he was in that light box look. He also led the league at one point with Chicago Bears as well. We're not fully 2-gap, but we're an attack and react type of defense, right? So just looking at all those Fangio defenses, I was looking at the Saints in that 4-year stretch that Aaron Glenn was there between 2016 and 2020. It might be 5 years. Either way, that stretch between when he was there and what that looked like, it looked pretty much the exact same. I put together this chart, and I know I threw it up kind of randomly before we started the show.
Can I touch on something really quick?
Please, go ahead. Yes.
It was more to, we're here to stop the pass. Our run lanes, our run fits are going to be predicated off like stopping the pass and things like that. Yes. If you run a lot of, let's say cover 2. Okay, that's considered a light box, because you don't have 8 men in a box in a cover 2. What you're doing is your fits are going to be to honestly bounce stuff to the cornerback. If you're going to run a cover 2, you have to have a tough cornerback. He has to have heart, because plays are going to get bounced to you to where you have to tackle. And then if you run cover 6, one side you're still bouncing things to the corner, but on the other side you're still fitting stuff to that safety. So
objective to what you just said is to roll the football outside to your skill players, of course. That's where it comes into when we start talking about these linebackers and why we need certain pieces. You brought up a great point, I think, with those physical cornerbacks, the guys that are going to be able to tackle. And then as we start to transition to the coverage side, which we'll get to, but some of the principles of that defense, I was kind of touching on it last time, but I was like, I saw last year they're passing off things vertical, and I was like, okay, well, what exactly was that? So like their man match coverage and their zone match coverage, like you hit on what Brian Branch did with Bama, so that they can keep those eyes in the backfield, but also, at the same time support the run, but be able to play, like you said, cover six, those split field coverages, different looks, post snap, that kind of thing. You're rolling things all the time. And that's why we need those smart, high IQ players.
And for those that are listening, I'm just showing a little example here, but I'll kind of talk through it. So what we see, in the NFL is you're not getting a lot of just basic man-to-man coverage a ton, or just like your pure cover 3 or cover 2. You have a lot of these match principles, things of that nature. It's in college as well. And you always think about it, I think about it in bunch, but you have to think about the leverage and how offenses look to attack you, right? What kind of concepts. So here's kind of an example here. I found this on an article, so shout out to this article, but it's kind of showing the examples of how these different assignments, but then there's also the during the play communication that's going on, where calls are being made based on a concept that's being shown and how players are passing each other off. For example, here you could see on the outside, your number one corner on the number one receiver, because he's on the outside, gets listed with Meg, meaning man everywhere he goes. Then your slot corner, who's essentially covering the number 2 receiver in this case, he would be the guy in this call defensively that would be aggressively attacking those screen looks. You think about a team like the Packers, likes the RPO game. Then your inside, maybe your off-ball linebacker can cover the shallow cross, but he also can play the wall coverage technique, right? So you're kind of walling it off inside with that inside leverage, but if it works vertical, now you can pass it off to the safety, who's responsible for covering it up if it goes vertical. Or if you got to look like this is a smash example, a smash concept. So this is where I always have to think of leverage. I think it's a great example. We had one last year. I think it was this exact concept where Will Harris dropped back and he took away the potential smash concept from Green Bay. And that was a play that stuck out to me because, one, it was easy to identify, but two, it was like, man, that's where I like Will Harris because he's intelligent. And when you get looks like that, where if your safety is inside of the number 2 receiver and the number 2 receiver runs a corner route and say he's matched up with, a coverage player that's sitting in maybe inside leverage, and then the outside corner, he is manned up, but his man just runs a quick 5-yard hitch. Now, all of a sudden, that corner route could have that leverage, and you have no help. But if they can make that on-the-field adjustment while the play is going on, the cornerback can read that, drop back into coverage, take away that corner route, and then all of a sudden, that number 2 who was playing the slot that maybe went vertical could pass that off and then drop underneath. Think Brian Branch, who did that at Alabama, right? We went through that video, did the breakdown. Didn't go as detailed like this, but it was when you saw a lot of that wall coverage, passing it off vertical, then drop back underneath. That's just one example. But obviously, I don't know all the examples, and I don't know it all extremely well, but it's something I'm still learning too. However, that's what you just see in the NFL is things like that. It's not just your basic, coverages. And to what Rad hit on with the cover 6, right, where it's split field is cover 2, half field is cover 4. That's where you have to have that flexibility because a lot of teams may do that based on the strength of the field or, for example, who you're going up against. If you got DK on one side, we saw it last year. If you're trying to protect over top against DK, maybe you run a little bit of a cover 2 look on one side with that safety over top. But then on the flip side, if you want to potentially get more aggressive, maybe you're playing up against tight ends and you're trying to jump some of their drive concept or whatever that may be, then you can flip to that cover 4 on the opposite side, and that's where you talk about that split coverage. But that takes that high football IQ to communicate where that's pre-snap, post-snap, all of the moving parts. So you have to have those pieces, and I think that was a huge part of, you're changing up a little schematically, but also the less variables with veteran pieces. So this is the play that I was talking about from last year. For those that are listening, this is Lions versus Packers. It led to an Aiden Hutchinson 11-yard sack. But if you don't see what the coverage is doing, you don't know maybe why Rodgers took that sack. But it's a great example of the split field coverage, how one side is doing one thing, the other is doing something else. For example, here on the weak side of the formation, you have 2 man coverage players. Chris Board is in to man up the number 2 receiver, and you can see he's going to follow his man across the field. Meanwhile, on the flip side, you're going to see Alex Anzalone, he's playing sort of that wall coverage that we touched on, and then as it goes vertical, the number 3 receiver works into that corner route. He's going to pass it off vertical. But then to the last example that we touched on, now that receiver from the slot, that speed slot, had have leverage. However, the number 2 corner, in this case Will Harris, his man breaks underneath. So he gives that off to the off-ball inside linebacker because of the concept, which is Alex Anzalone, who dropped his man off, and he drops to take that leverage away. And then finally on the outside, you have an inside leverage. Man, everywhere he goes, it seems like, here with Jerry Jacobs, and he's just going to cut off this little dig route. On one side of the field, you have a guy like Chris Board who's sitting inside leverage, but playing man coverage on the number 2 receiver with help over top. It allows him to take away that quick hitter man-to-man. Rodgers has to get off of that. Then there's also pressure between James Houston and Aiden Hutchinson. But on the flip side, then you get more of those zone matching principles where Alex Anzalone is going to pass it off, drop off his man who runs vertical to that cap defender there in Kirby Joseph, and then drop back underneath. Ultimately, Will Harris drops as well. So you get 2 different looks, the true split field look here in coverage, and that's where you need those high IQ players, but you also have to have the pieces. Just like it's stated here, if you usually have a big nickel or a true linebacker, you may play more of the zone match. However, if you had a third type of cornerback, you could play potentially a little bit more of the man match because you trust that guy to be able to carry his route vertical versus a big linebacker doing it.
Came out that Devin Witherspoon was our pick at 6, but he went 1 pick ahead. And one thing Witherspoon would do is tackle, was a high Q corner. He was the pick at 6, so then we traded back, took Gibbs. I love the pick, but he was the initial pick at 6. I don't know if people know that. It was Witherspoon. But that ties into that defensive scheme and how we want to get things done. Right. Even though if he may or may not have started this year, but he was going to be with us for the future.
Gotcha. No, I mean that's a good point because like because I remember we talked about going into like what, because I thought we go cornerback high. Witherspoon, like it kind of looked like, oh, they were probably gonna take, because they did move out after it happened. They didn't do it before. They kind of just waited for it to happen. But I think it's a good point because I know I like Gonzalez coming in, but like, yeah, there was a very different play style between the two.
100%, 100%.
One had question marks as a tackler. The other one was like, that's what he does really well.
That's what he's known for.
And that's, to your point, that's exactly what Brian Branch is. I thought he was insane as a run defender, and that's also, Gardner Johnson, those types of players. Okay, so this is defensive line. Let's start here, I guess. Now, Brad, you can see this. People that are watching.
I see it.
I sort of color coded some ideas,
which is good. It's good. It's good. Okay, it makes sense. It makes sense.
That's the artist in me, kind of like
Pascal. That's not the artist, but Pascal.
It's a little bit
Hendrickson. I get it. Okay, I'll give you a little credit. It is.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's definitely that. That's what that is. Appreciate that. But here's the thing, right now. I want you to kind of like walk through this here, but the kind of to outline this for people that can't see as well. So I feel like we've had these different stops along the way, and like I said, to the point I made about Brad Holmes, like he's giving guys opportunities. He didn't come in as like, Trey, we got to get him out of here. Like he was one of the talented players. We're gonna move him here, we're gonna move Romeo here, and it was always about like trying to adapt and fit to what we had. And now, like a few years later, we're looking at it saying, man, it's gonna look a little different. So how do these pieces fit together? So for those that can't see or those that can't, what I did was I basically just went through a lot of the key defensive linemen. 2016, the defense was not great for the New Orleans Saints. So they ranked 31st in points allowed. It was 2017 when they took that jump forward, and there was a lot of talk like, why did they take that jump? We're going to talk about linebacker in a second because I think I got some good stuff for that. All right, I got some good stuff for that. But defensive line, who are the key pieces on this defensive line? So, Brad, if you want to, kind of give your thoughts on some of the guys that I color coded here, and then I'll kind of talk about, why I kind of comp them together. Most of this is based on the build, most of it, but then I'll kind of give some notes on it. So what do you think when you're looking at this?
Brad Holmes even said back when he was with the St. Louis Rams, they continue to draft D linemen because you can never have enough D linemen. And I think that's what we're doing.
Yes.
I know I'm jumping off of like schematics and, what our defense is going to be, but we're continuing to add D linemen that are, I'm going to say it, positionless. You add Aiden Hutchinson, who had an outstanding rookie year. And Aiden Hutchinson really can bounce inside if need be.
Mm-hmm.
So I love what they're doing against the D line. I don't want to go player for player like the Saints versus our D line, because I think the Saints, you get to looking at Cam Jordan, who's a future Hall of Famer. Hendrickson's having a great career. Sheldon Rankins is having a good career, so I don't want to go like that. But if you go through and find our pieces that along this image here, we're building something special. But just because a lot of those guys they're interchangeable in positions. And one thing I will say about all these fools, they have a high motor. They have a very high motor. You may not have to be the most talented D lineman, but if you have a high motor, it can help you. Pascal, what was he known for? Having a good motor. We already know Hutch has a motor. McNeil has a motor. I don't know if y'all know this about our rookie Big Broderick. He's got a motor. I don't know if y'all know that. He's got a motor. Isaiah Bugg plays his butt off. We ain't seen too much of Levi, but I'm still that, I was the biggest fan of Levi when he was coming out, things like that. But a lot of our D linemen have high motors. Third and long situation, that D line can look like James Houston, Aiden Hutchinson, Romeo, and Josh Pascal. That's the 4 we sending at you. And I like that 4.
That's tough.
Like, truly.
I mean, you'd like Chase Young in there a little more, but it's
I would. I mean, let's not go back to last episode, but yes, I would like Chase Young.
Yes,
check it out, baby. I would like to flip out Romeo for Chase Young, but let's just say it's that. Man. If it's Romeo, Aiden Hutchinson, Pascal, and I forgot who the other. It doesn't matter. You could throw in Kaminsky, bro.
And that was the main thing. Definitely, I'm glad you made that clear. Like, I can't compare Cam Jordan to John Kaminsky. That's disrespectful. That's disrespectful, but
it is.
It was more so like what you touched on. It was more so about the measurables and just trying to kind of put the piece together visually, so how you can see what this could look like. And I think there's a couple that I want to point out here. First off, Pascal Hendrickson, maybe a little bit different in terms of play style. You hit on that. The guy's versatile. The big thing that there for me with Josh Pascal, right, is we saw it a little bit last season. His ability to we just touched on, play that like gap and a half idea, right? Because what he was and what you notice with a lot of these guys, like you hit on, number one, high motor, but then also the flip side is a lot of these dudes are real explosive and they win leverage into contact, right? Like those are the guys that can hold it down. They can open up some of those edge pieces, allow you to play a little bit lighter because you have those big physical pieces. Plus, big comp there, and I know they're not directly there, but Pascal and Cam Jordan, in the sense of we know what he is as a leader. I got to give Pascal, for at least his college days, right? The only 3-time team captain there, the cancer that he fought through. So, like, he had to go through a lot. And we know about his leadership and what he was known for. But a couple that I want to point out. So, I compare Malcolm Brown and Lee McNeil. Size and those things, very similar. Now, Malcolm Brown was essentially like the second player through, as they had Sheldon Rankins first. But I comp him in terms of size. But what I think is going to change here is that I think Aleem McNeil is going to be lighter than what this is, because this is when they came out for the draft. And I think Aleem McNeil is going to transition a little bit more to the guy that I put at the bottom there at Levi. It's kind of that David Onyemata type of role, because we saw it last year. He played that role for us. I think he's going to slim down. I think he has a little bit, and he's going to stick into that role. Initially, I think this would make sense. You're like, oh, he's the nose tackle. But I think now it's going to transition just because of, what we've had to deal with health-wise. And then that next point that I wanted to point out there was the Onyemata Levi. You can see the similarities in the build and what the vision was for the role. But what I liked about Onyemata, even looking for him this offseason, was same point. Like, okay, yeah, he's the 3-tech pass rusher, but Levi was your boy, Rad. And
he was.
You knew with Levi, right, that like, okay, there was areas that he had to improve in consistency, but this was a guy that was known as a little bit undersized for the position, but for him, he was able to stand there. He had that strength. He had that explosiveness, that first step.
Disruptive.
Like
he was disruptive. He was very disruptive.
The Broderick Martin one, I think this is key. I think this one can't be overlooked. I know people, who the heck is Taylor Stallworth? So I was just watching some of their all-22 from that year, and I was like, who is this big dude playing the zero? Taylor Stallworth. But I compared that to a Broderick Martin because, again, like that's the kind of piece. So when you talk about why do they need a Broderick Martin, that's the kind of piece that defense needed. New Orleans Saints needed that kind of piece. And the reason that they needed that kind of piece, at Stallworth playing that position, they didn't have that pure nose tackle necessarily. So he had to kind of do the dirty work. That way they could kick the other dudes out a little bit more, right? They didn't have that 330-pound dude at that time to play that position. So they needed to draft him. That way they could move a piece over. So I know a lot of the talk for us was like, what 3-tech the line's going to add? And then they didn't. Instead, they went nose tackle. Well, kind of to me like the Stallworth idea, you add the Broderick Martin to move the Aleem McNeil, to open up that position flexibility, because if he's got to sit there, then who's the guy that's going to win those battles at 3? But to your point, they're all flexible. And then the Davenport one, like he was more projection. Hutch he was kind of a proven kind of prospect coming out. I mean, as much as you can be, I guess. And
Right.
yeah, I didn't like this isn't even including like the Romeo Quoras and you know, I put Alex Okafor on there. But the big thing for me was just like kind of the visual of how they could fit in this defense. And the main point was they can all play that kind of gap and a half idea, open up a number for you defensively because they have that build and the ability to hold their ground and things like that. But then also you can see how the sizes kind of play into it as well.
I think we're going to be okay because we have a slew of players that can play multiple positions, different shapes, sizes. I know it sounds weird. We're talking like we're kids, but we do have different types of defensive linemen that we can throw at you. James Houston ain't even on this list, and he's the best pass rusher on our team. I'll end it right there.
And that's gonna be trust me, I got a place for that, and we're gonna hit that right. We can hit that next. We'll hit that next. We'll transition right into that.
Facts.
One more point that I want to make, because you know I got all these pages over here, so I'm just coming across random stats that
you can read them. Okay,
here we go. Look at this one. So people want to know the numbers, Rad. Like, right, that's what the people are here for. They're here for the numbers. They want to know, like, okay, well, what are you really saying? So how about this? Saints D line 2007, 2018. I told you they took a jump defensively, so they had the same defensive line, the same key pieces from that year to the next year. So I know people have the question about how are we going to stop the run. We didn't add maybe that big time Jalen Carter. Well, with those same pieces, and we're going to talk about linebacker, you saw the improvement. They went from 27th to 2nd in yards per carry. They went from 16th to 2nd in terms of yards per game. And they went from 26th to expected points added to 1st in terms of expected points added. And it wasn't the D-line as much as it was the linebacker additions, as well as them able to put it together schematically. So the point that I just made, the stalwart, the guy that's like, who is that dude? His ability to play that zero as a guy that came out listed as like a 320 nose tackle allowed a guy like Sheldon Rankins, who, well, how big is Lee McNeil, right? He's a 300-pound dude that he's going to slim up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Sheldon Rankins was able to kick out. And what Sheldon Rankins known for? Hey, that's a big dude that's quick on his feet. What do you call Lee McNeil?
Twinkle toes, baby.
There you go.
Uber athletic for that size.
Yeah. So there you go. So that's why you need that guy. You need that like dude that might do the ugly work to allow Twinkle Toes to go to work. You know what I'm saying? Just, hey,
I can dig it.
Okay,
I can dig it. I've been a fan since day one.
Lee McNeil's been a dog since day one, to be
honest.
He's
solid. He's a good D lineman. Brad Holmes is drafting very well. I'm not going to say we need him so bad, but he would just be such a good addition if he can play like he played at University of Washington. Just come in and be that disruptive D tackle. He ain't even leave at this point. Levi doesn't have to start. I just like to see you here and there. When people get tired, bam, our second unit. Oh, we still got Levi on that bad boy, Julian. We still got dogs on that second unit. And Levi, you're leading the way because you're super disruptive at the 3 technique.
And hey, to your point, like you were talking about addressing, remember, like, not all these dudes that you're seeing up here when you're looking at this Saints D line, and these again, not really the edge rushers, they're more so the defensive linemen, right? Like, not all these guys were drafted extremely high. Hendrickson was a round 3 pick. Leaf Cam Jordan was round 1. Malcolm Brown was a high draft pick, but he was a guy that signed in free agency from New England that didn't get his 5th-year option picked up. Yamada was I believe he was a day 3 pick. So he was another kind of under the radar guy.
Davenport was a reach. Davenport was a reach.
Yeah, and a lot of these guys, they weren't immediate producers. You know, like a lot of these dudes, they brought him in. They said, "Hey, next year." Like they just kind of eased them in. If you look at their depth chart, and I think it's similar to us, Red. I know. Remember, I was trying to talk you in the Super Bowl, and I was like, "Hey, you look at our depth chart, though. We kind of got that overlap between the young dudes and like some good vets." That's what the Saints were like when they were tough, man. You look at it, you're like, "Dang, the roster is deep," because they had that overlap all the time. There was like the next guy in the wing you could just see, and then all of a sudden, as that guy moved forward, the next guy stepped in. It was like, man, this guy's. Like, who is this dude? But it's because he had an opportunity to kind of ease his way into it. And I think that's what the Bugs and those kind of guys are going to do. Hopefully the Romeos, the Charles, things like that. This next transition, we'll go to linebacker in a second because that's the next key point. But to what you just said about James Houston, he wasn't on there. So there's like 2 ways that you can do this, I think, defensively, right? You can either go with that third linebacker, which is kind of like the hybrid. And I know I've compared I've brought this guy up a few times in like streams, Zach Bond. And Brad, do you know who Zach Bond is yet, man? I know I bring it up. People are like, who the heck is Zach Bond? You know who Zach Bond is?
Zach Bond? Or no, I don't.
Oh my god. Okay, so he was a round 3 pick out of Wisconsin by the Saints in 2020 or 2020. I think it was 2020. You can either go with a piece like that, as that, extra piece that can kick out, maybe play in the slot a little bit, or you can go, with kind of the big nickel, which to me is like the CJ Gardner-Johnsons, but you can also have both of those pieces. And I think that's where James Houston comes into play, right? Because there's got to figure out how to make him he wants to figure out how to be an all-down player. I got to find a way to get on the field. But we know about James, that was the weird thing about him. It's like, man, he could pass rush, right? He had like 28 sacks, but he's 6 foot 240. It's like, that's not normal. That's not your defensive end. So for him, he can be the guy, and I vision this. Charles Harris, you could throw him in here. You could throw Derek Barnes in this if you want to, of that guy that, because he's a former DN, but that guy that can, get up there, pass rush. We saw the athleticism last year, but it cleans him up a little bit. And then the flip side is when you want to lean into more of the coverage side, you don't want to have the drop off where it's like, man, I put CJ in there and now our run defense is kind of trash because he can't make a tackle, or Brian Branch. You're not going to get that drop off. To me, the only difference is one's much better in coverage. The other one's much better as a pass rusher. So you kind of got a little bit of both there. Well, what are your thoughts on that? Star position.
I get it. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense when you look at it like that. Look at you hitting points. Oh, he's feeling himself. He started leaning back in his chair, folks, and everything.
Because here's the thing, we about to get the linebacker, Red. I know this is what you were waiting for. We need to break it down. We got to tell the people why this makes sense.
I'm gonna try. I don't know if I can, bro.
Hold back to Fangio a little bit here. And some of the linebackers that he had added throughout his time, different spots as defensive coordinator. One of his big additions was San Fran. He brought in Navarro Bowman, a 6 foot, 242-pound linebacker. You go to his time with Chicago. Now, with Chicago, for a little bit there, it was Kristen Jones, who's with us. He was that big off-ball linebacker because from what I've read, it's like, hey, you got to have that guy in this defense because to the point that I made earlier, or also with a Rad sit on, we talk about playing different positions. There's flexibility, right? You're not going to come out the same defense every time. Sometimes you only got that one off-ball linebacker, and maybe Alex is on the edge. But when Alex was at his best, Rad, what was Alex doing? Alex was playing in coverage. Alex was clean. And when that was the case, that was when that man Demario Davis came over there from the Jets. And that allowed him to do some of those, 5-1 type of looks, right? Where the guy that would sit in the inside, they got to be confident, hey, you can shed an offensive lineman. See, like all these teams that like to play with the 220-pound linebackers, and I know but all these teams that do this, I love these guys in the draft. It's like, that's great, right? But it's not great once he's responsible for having to deal with a little bit more than just going upfield. What happens when he has to deal with an offensive lineman? So for the Lions, if they're going to lighten the box, they got to have a guy that can deal with that. So I'm going through these names. Christian Jones was one of the big backers at Chicago. Then ultimately at number 8, Rad, I'm a trivia question here. I got you here. 2018.
Roquan Smith.
You had that. Did you look that up? You looked
no,
at the notes.
I didn't look.
Because you looked at the notes.
I was a fan of him coming out. I know when Roquan Smith got drafted.
Oh, snap. Well, hey, so he drafted Roquan Smith at 8. Let's not forget that. So he did that with Chicago.
A dog.
Also had brought in Danny Trevathan on a deal there with Chicago as well. And saw with Denver in his final season, they ended up kind of losing their linebackers to injury. But he had drafted Baron Browning.
I'm still kind of lost about the pick. Like, I think Jack Campbell is a good football player, but just taking him at 18, because I mean, if you've watched any of the YouTubes or anything, y'all know me that I felt like he would have been there at 30. Would we have picked 34? I think he would have fell to there for us. So even though I didn't know what was really, it wasn't that much niceness at 18 anyways. Me and Dose talked about this. Like, what really was there at 18 besides like Cansey, or we could probably took Quentin Johnson before the Chargers got him and things like that. But Dose, it seems like you're trying to say, like, we upgraded at linebacker. I'm just confused from an organizational point. Why take a linebacker in the first round? He is a good football player, but you just signed Anzalone to a 2-3 year deal.
Yep.
Malcolm Rodriguez is a good football player who started for us, had a lot of splash plays. I know in coverage he's kind of a liability because the guy's 5'9", 5'10". Derek Barnes, which they're preaching now, has taken a step forward. Like, it's like the light switch is flipped on. We don't even know if Jack Campbell is going to start week 1 when
let me break
press conference. It's just kind of I'm kind of lost on, like, I'm trying to like figure out why we got him. Okay, I know what Jack Campbell brings. He's good at stopping the run.
Yeah,
he's a heady, high IQ football player, and he's really good at zone coverage. He's 6'5", long, so he's making windows smaller underneath for the quarterback / wide receiver tight end because of his height. I get that, and he's good at zone coverage. So I kind of get why we added him, just because you could throw him out there and them guys gonna get to his zone fits, make windows smaller for quarterbacks. He's on our team, but I think we reached. I mean, I've been saying that since the day after the draft. Like, I tried to buy into the pick, even though it didn't make a lot of sense, but I think he's a good football player, but I still think we reached at 18 because I think he would have been there. I mean, we don't have to agree. We're not here to agree.
I know, but let me tell you why I think you're wrong.
It just dawned on me. I think we reached. I really do. Because we already had 3 linebackers. We had hold on, let me finish. We had Derek Barnes we traded up for 2 years ago. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you trading up for somebody, that means you feel a certain type of way about the guy. He might need to get on the field. I knew it was going to be a transition from D-line to off-ball linebacker. Now the switch is flipped and they're pumping him up. Anzalone, I like. He's kind of the quarterback of our defense, culture fit. He's one of the Saints guys, played solid football, but you now signed him to a 2-3 year deal, okay? Malcolm Rodriguez, he boomed. We didn't know that. 6th-round pick, boom. But if you watch the kid's film at Oklahoma State, you'd have known he was a good linebacker, but there is some deficiencies as far as height and things like that. So we still have 3 linebackers in our room that potential could start, or they're going to fight for a starting position. Why go get a guy in the first who he's taller than all of them? He's not faster than all of them. He's heady. He loves to watch film. And he's good at zone coverage. I think what probably separates him from those 3 is that he's probably the best in zone coverage. I mean, the first, when I think he could have been there at 34, I think it was a reach. It just dawned on me. I can't put it together, Dose.
Let me break it down.
I can't figure out why we took him. I'm going to give you that opportunity. And you know what? Here's your opportunity, because I think we reached.
Hold up, Brad. Because I feel like you just came to this conclusion, man.
I like him. I did. It hit me. In your voice. I think he's a good football player. But I do now. It's like, bro, I think we might have reached on a linebacker, bro. Like,
wait. Let me break it down.
He's a good player, but like, really, he would have been there at 34.
Let me break it down for you. Because my first disagreement is I don't think he was going to be there at 34. That's my first.
Okay.
Now you may be right though.
I knew when I asked you would have taken because you'd have to go look at a lot of teams, and that's a lot of. But I think he would have. Go ahead.
Well, I heard there was a couple teams like Tampa Bay may have been interested, or maybe
New England. New England was there. We always want to pick because New England say they're going to pick him, so we pick him. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I don't know. Jelani Tavai. Hey, Jelani Tavai's been good. Yo, Rad, I just looked up. Jelani Tavai's actually been playing pretty good. Hey, look it up.
You know what?
Look it up at home, chat. Chat. I don't know who I'm talking to. Let me break it down, man. Let me break it down. So Jack Campbell, right? Because I'm with you, and I didn't think we'd take a linebacker. And I like Alex Anzalone too, so I was happy we brought him back. So I didn't think we would take one. I was shocked when we did. But let's start back there from the beginning, right? So kind of the point I touched on, where was Alex at his best? Alex had his best season when his first season healthy, when he was freed up. He was playing more of that coverage type of role. Now, if you remember back to your point about drafting Derek Barnes, we traded up round 4. I think we picked him up. And I remember linebacker got really light after that draft pick. So once we took Derek Barnes, there wasn't a lot of linebackers up there. And he was a projection, which made sense because of where he was in the draft. But remember what they said. Hey, you're going to come in. You're going to play the Mike linebacker position. Now, they had signed Alex Anzalone. So it wasn't like Alex wasn't there. They drafted Derek and said, this is what you're going to do. And again, I think the vision was from that point on, it was clear, like, okay, this is how we want to play Alex. Now, you're young, so Alex is going to hold some things down for you, right? But there's a way that we want to build this. We just didn't maybe have the draft capital. So I think the vision was always there to address this. Now, with Derek Barnes, it hasn't all come together in the sense of he hasn't been like a complete 3-down player. He's definitely improved against the run, but it hasn't been like a complete, 3-down type of thing, coverage, that kind of stuff. So there's that first point. The second point, and I think when you kind of compare it to the what the Saints brought in with DeMario Davis, and you look at that kind of build, he was a guy that
Alex is a wheel. He's a wheel linebacker.
Now he could play different spots. He's proved us.
But he's truly a wheel.
He struggles to take on blocks. He does.
He's a wheel. Then you're a wheel.
He is, and
Jack's supposed to play the mic.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm with you in terms of Malcolm Rodriguez. Now, he actually played more run defensive snaps. It was only about 1. He did play more run defensive snaps this past year than pass defensive snaps. And that's like super rare because in today's league, everybody's passed the ball majority of the time. Mm-hmm. So to know that means they're not putting him out there in those pass downs. Remember, last year we had Chris Board for pass downs, right? Like we had different pieces that we would just throw out there on pass downs. So they didn't trust him as an all down player, but Malcolm, we know, and that some of that is just limitations. Malcolm, we know he's going to go play the run. He's going to play that well, so he can immediately step in there. It's just that now you're doing all this passing. But when they brought in Mario Davis, where he came from the Jets, he played the same role essentially as what Jack is coming into play. Now, one thing with Jack Campbell, while he's a bigger linebacker, point you hit on, help us in zone coverage, that kind of thing. Like, you look at it, he has shorter arms than Demario Davis, for example.
Yes,
which is
he
wild.
does.
He got shorter arms, but he's really tall, right? So it's sort of weird in that sense, but he's a really good athlete, really fluid. He's got the best change of direction skills probably of any linebacker that we have. But where Alex is at his best, he struggles to take on blocks and deal with that consistently. He needs to be freed up. But if you're going to play lighter boxes, you have to have a guy that can deal with that. Goal of those Fangio defense, another one of those notes I had, was that you wanted to create inefficient pass plays. And we're going to talk about coverage here in a sec, but you wanted to create inefficient pass plays. And the way that you did that is by how they did it schematically. So, they would make it look like, oh, it's a lighter box, right? Okay, hey, there's only 6 dudes in there, so you could play a little bit differently. You could run the football on this team. That's where you get that extra DB. That's where you get the way they're playing up front. And then also the linebacker that has to be able to handle those responsibilities, which in this year's draft, that wasn't there. I mean, that was the only guy that was literally built like that outside of Noah Sewell that could play that type of role. So I think the big thing is it's not as much as it is what Jack Campbell can do for you, but to me, the biggest thing is what's it going to do for Alex and also Malcolm Rodriguez down the road, but what's it going to do for an Alex Anzalone? And then on top of that, that is a missing piece, I believe, of what the lines are trying to do schematically. And I think you saw that last year. They had to throw bodies against certain teams. They would have to throw extra bodies in the box to stop the run. If they want to disguise, give you different looks in the back end, create more turnovers, and more so, force you to make inefficient run plays, inefficient pass plays, which I have some good numbers for. If they're going to force you to do that, right, they have to have a guy that can lighten up the box a little bit. So I think it's more so about what Jack Campbell does for everybody else more than what he's going to just specifically do, by himself. That's why I think this was such an important draft pick for them, because of Derek Barnes, right? I think the vision was he was going to turn into that potentially, but it never really happened. It hasn't happened to this point, but that's like the missing piece to put this defense together. And what you notice with a lot of these defenses is, and it wasn't overlooked by Fangio, it wasn't overlooked by the Saints, is that they needed that piece. They had to find a way to get it. And as soon as they did, the defense got a lot better. And for Alex, it's going to help him, I believe, a ton. And that's why I think they signed him to a multi-year deal, because if their vision was, hey, we drafted Jack Campbell, but we're not really sure what Alex's role is now going to be. I don't think they would have given a 3-year deal to Alex Anzalone if they had a vision of taking a linebacker relatively high. So the fact that they did that tells me that they have a plan still for Alex Anzalone. Like, there's still a legit plan there for how this guy's going to be used, but it's going to be a little bit different, kind of like we talked about with adding Broderick and how that changes up a little bit of the role for Lee McNeil.
I mean, I said my piece. I just think it was a reach. I like the player in Jack Campbell. Hopefully he does help our defense. I just don't see where he fits in at. I mean, it's good to have depth at the end of the day, because injuries happen in the NFL. If a guy's not performing, you can replace him with another guy, and competition creates greatness. Okay, I'm all about that. First round draft and say the guys we got in are day one starters. They're plug and play. We're not waiting.
That? You know why he said that, Red? To the point I just made. They need that piece.
He said they're plug and play players, but then I read that we don't know if even Jack Campbell's going to be a day one starter at this point.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
I mean, it sounds like it sounds like. Like, okay, you're going to be on second team. You're going to need somebody to get hurt or F up before you come in. Like, that's what it sounds like, bro.
Wait, hold on. Let me ask you. Did Eric Barnes play last year?
He did, but he wasn't he wasn't out there like that.
But let me ask you this then. If Malcolm, I just want to get your thought. If Malcolm Rodriguez, let's just say it's even. The fact that he's not overwhelmingly in today's league, like I think Alex Anzalone was like 100+ difference in terms of snaps versus coverage snaps and run defensive snaps. The fact that Malcolm's is leaning heavier to run defense tells you where they feel comfortable using him. So it's like, if you have to have a different piece, for example, if you have to throw Chris Borden on pass downs to play that role, now I kind of got two things going at once in terms of roster spots. But at the same time, that means that on those early downs, if I don't trust Chris Borden to be dominant against the run too, now I got to take him off, put Malcolm back on the field. But a majority of teams are passing. So now I can't keep him out there because I don't trust him in all these coverage assignments. And to the point you made, it's all about high IQ players. It's all about the high IQ players that are going to communicate, because you're going to have all these moving pieces. Guys are going to be passing off different things to each other. It's why there's certain DBs that I like that we kept.
Rodriguez is a high IQ linebacker. I think
Absolutely.
Alex Anzalone is. I mean, he's been in the league for so many years. You should be high IQ, but he was good coming out of college. I liked him at Florida. I thought he was better than your boy Gerard Davis when he was coming out. Anyways,
oh my goodness.
Jack Campbell is supposed to be, and he seems like he's a high IQ player. Barnes, I'm not going to say he's an IQ player because honestly, you did a position change when you went to the next level. That's hard. I'm not going to sit here and knock Barnes because switching positions when you get to the next level is going to be hard. Doing it at any level from high school to college, but you did it at the highest level. So I respect. And now they say his switch is flipped on. He's playing like a night and day difference better. Like, so where is he about to fit in at, bro?
But here's the thing, though, Rad.
And
you got to remember this. You got to remember this, though. Because to your point about James Houston and those guys, like, where's their role and how you find that spot for him? If you look back at those defenses that Aaron Glenn was a part of, their best defenses, or specifically when they had the 2000, I think it was 18 or 19, right, when they really took off, and we'll talk about that, but they had their deepest linebacker room once they brought in the Davis because they also had the pieces of Klein, right? They had an AJ Klein, Manti Te'o. Yeah, Manti Te'o was there.
I said Tua.
I know you were going for it, though. Yeah, he was there. He was a really unathletic big linebacker that could play the run inside. I think similarly to an AJ Klein, right? Kind of the same thing, leans a little bit heavier run defense. That's where Malcolm fits in because Malcolm's going to go in there and play the run. Like, it wouldn't be a problem. Though. Absolutely. Like, it would, and Klein was good for him. Klein was a multi-year starter, but they still on top of that say, hey, we can't have this guy continue to be our starter because it doesn't allow us to mesh as well in terms of like, okay, we drafted Alex Anzalone. Like, how do we mesh these two together? Well, if we have we have to have that. Like, Malcolm's a great run defender, and there's situations where him and Campbell can play together. But the situations of him and Alex and Malcolm playing together, I don't think brings the best out of both of them specifically because of what it entails of the job for Alex Anzalone at that point.
Okay. So who's our starters day one? Two. I want two because I feel like we're going to be a lot.
The first snap or majority of the snaps in game one?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, hold on. That's what starter means.
I don't like how you always. I don't like how you always follow up a question with a question because
you're right. I did do that.
You're right. I mean, but it makes a lot of sense. Who's getting the most snaps?
It's going to be Jack
Campbell at linebacker.
It's going to be Jack Campbell.
Two of them and Alex.
Oh, Jack and Alex.
Okay.
But here's the vision though. Hey, Malcolm Rodriguez, you keep balling because here's the thing. I'll say this. And I'm a big Alex guy. I believe Malcolm Rodriguez is a much better run defender than Alex Anzalone.
Alex Anzalone. He is.
Much better.
He is.
And even though he's like undersized, he's been able to take on blocks because he's freakishly strong. Like, he's a much better run defender.
He's more athletic than Alex Anzalone. It's just that the guy's 5'9", 5'10".
So here's the question, Rad. Why in a draft with all of these pieces, the Deion Henleys, the Dorian Williams, why in a draft with all these dudes that are 230, 235 coverage backers, why in that draft go with the biggest linebacker and also re-sign Alex for 3 years? Because they got a vision for Alex. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was a vision for him. There's a plan. They're like, hey, we got to get the best out of this.
They're gonna move him to Will, and when he's done with the Lions in 2 years, Malcolm Rodriguez is gonna step in, or Barnes.
He might. They might. Like, we'll get another linebacker. You never know.
No. Let's take a break,
like that,
and then we're gonna finish up with the back end of the defense. We appreciate everybody that listening and tapping in. You know what I'm saying? To Blue42, baby.
Yeah. So the first question is actually one for you. I'm gonna throw it to you.
For me.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna ask it for you. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I don't know if it was like directed towards you, but it was. Yeah.
Just ask it.
All right. So his question. This comes from my man John. John asked.
I'm John.
Brad, oh yeah, you are.
Did I send this question?
John asked John. Here you go. He says.
Okay.
No. He says. Hey, Rad. Why does your beard and mustache always look worse than DoseOfDion? Oh, I won't read that one out loud.
First off, Dose can't grow a beard, and Dose mustache is not better than mine. Damn it,
Rad. You know that. You know what's gonna happen here in a few years. We're gonna be. Anyway, this is the real question. The real question comes from my man Ronald. Shout out to Ronald. I won't put your last name out there, but he asked this: what do you think about us trading for Isaiah Simmons, becoming more athletic at the second level to help cover those scrambling quarterbacks? I think that's based on what we talked about last episode, and it also fits in well with what we just talked about, Brad. What do you think?
Right, we just finished on linebackers. Hey, Good question,
That was
Ronald.
Good job, Brad.
No last name.
Yeah.
I'm not for trading for a linebacker. I just feel like we just reached on getting a linebacker in the first round. Simmons didn't have a good rookie year, but I did pull stats. His last 2 years with Arizona has been solid. He would be the most athletic, probably one of, honestly, like pound for pound, the most athletic person on our defense if we're going pound for pound.
Mhm.
But I don't want to give up anything to go get him, anything like that, just because is he going to make us that much better? And dealing with scrambling quarterbacks, I mean, we really only got one in the division, which is Fields. And I'm not the type of person. I'm not big on QB spying. We're holding down a position just to watch some quarterback so he doesn't scramble. Like, no, there's other ways you can stop a quarterback from scrambling. We hit it on last episode where you play less man, more zone, where the eyes are on the quarterback. You can slant your D line. You can stunt your D line to where they're hitting different gaps and things like that to throw the quarterback off balance. So I'm not going to get a guy just so it makes us more athletic so we can spy a quarterback. 2, is he really going to make us that much better at that second level? I don't really truly think so because his numbers aren't jumping off the chart. And 3, I'm not giving up no picks for somebody who's possibly about to be a free agent. We don't even know if Arizona's going to pick up his 5th-year option. Did they pick up his 5th year?
No.
I mean, he's with that Akuda.
Yeah, they didn't. I don't think they did.
So it's like, nah, it's a guy we possibly can go get in free agency. So it's Randall, right? I'm not for that Isaiah Simmons. I did want him when he was coming out in the draft over Akuda, but no, I'm not making a trade for him.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point there, real quick, Red, about the spy. We know the Lions don't really buy into that idea either of having a spy on the field. They said it a ton last year, like tell whichever we're not using a spy. Like that's not what we're doing. You hit on it. We did all the slant rushing. We attacked Justin Fields a certain way, but we're not going to put a guy to that role. And I think to what you just said, right? First off, we're hearing Isaiah Simmons now playing like a defensive back. He might be playing cornerback, I guess, this season or something. I don't know, right? He's going to be playing a different position because they're trying to find a spot to fit his strengths best, which was the question coming out of the draft for him.
Right. What does he play?
Yeah, and the only reason I think the big reason you'd be interested in him is because of that excitement of like he's the unicorn type of build where he's like a special type of player that maybe you could figure something out.
And as I'm going back through here, the biggest thing for me is taking away snaps from potential players at a similar position. He's played a lot in the slot role with the Arizona Cardinals. He's played well. He's a good pass rusher. Also, at the same time, he's usually going to be a better coverage linebacker, athletically speaking. So, for a position, I think that is really going to be important for us in terms of being in sub package, either having more of your coverage piece or more of the blitzing piece, the split field coverage looks, all of those things we'll talk about. It's bringing him in, potentially taking away the snaps from a Brian Branch down the road, who I think is going to play a lot in that position, or even a James Houston, who I think can get into that position in pass rush if you're looking for that type of player. So it's more so about the snaps that he would be taking at that position, because that's the position that I would feel would be his best fit within our defense over being a pure outside corner or a starting safety, which could potentially be his fit. But at this point, I don't know if that's something that I would want to upgrade over a Tracy Walker or a Kirby Joseph.
But to be honest with you, I mean, like we just touched on Jack Campbell. I got some of his numbers right here, man. So Jack Campbell is 6'4.5", 249. He ran a 4.65, 37.5-inch vertical, 6'7", 4.3 cone. Like that's kind of a unicorn in today's league. As
those are nice numbers. Those are nice numbers.
And he's a pure linebacker, right? Like Isaiah Simmons, he's not even a pure linebacker. So that's why he's going to defensive back. So it's like I get the question, but I don't think it's necessary, because I think what's going to help us against that is what we've touched on here, which was the eyes in the backfield on the defensive backs, freeing up guys in the box, and all the moving parts in the back end. I don't think we need a unicorn to match, but certain teams like Derwin James feel like they can, because they can give you one look and then it's like, hey, you don't know post snap he's going to blitz or cover, so it's something you got to deal with. But I don't know, Brad, would you take a shot on that? I mean, you like Chase Young. Would you take a shot on like a unicorn piece? I just don't know where I'd put him.
Simmons, no. Chase Young, yes.
Okay. On this defensive backs, man, and the coverage specifically. One last point on the linebackers, just because I was just like throwing random stuff out there. With some of these linebackers, I do think it is key that you look at with the guys that they had. They always seem to have like one of the more physical linebackers because of that sense, like the bigger guys. Like they had AJ Johnson was a UDFA. He was a big linebacker, 6'2", 255 that they had with Denver that they had put in there. Like I said, they had Christian Jones. Now, Roquan Smith, your boy, Rab, but that as much as Roquan was undersized in that sense at like 235 and a little bit on the shorter side, that dude was just crazy. Like that, he was an elite talent. So it was like he's going to find a way to just make it work anyway. But the fact that they addressed it is the biggest thing to me there, that they felt like they needed that. Let's talk coverage for a second, because I think this is a big part. I want to touch on these stats. And I brought them up a lot last year, Rad. I'm sure you probably remember them. I should probably memorize these at this point because I say them all the time. Man, you know exactly what I'm about to say.
I'm excited about our secondary. Go ahead. This is where I'm
most excited.
I'm about to say. I'm excited.
I'm glad you're excited, because here's a reason to be excited. Last year, from week 9 on. Now, people say, why you do week 9 on? Well, here's why.
Because that's when they flipped. We flipped the switch.
Came back. That's why we flipped the switch to me. Okay, Jerry Jacobs came back, and we finally had a legitimate number 2 corner. Like, we didn't have elite corners, but we didn't have a liability. And I think that's the key, because I'm looking at some of these other teams that have struggled, all these teams with these connections to Fangio, the Glen, when they had a liability opposite of corner, that's when they had issues that they had to try to hide. That's when they had problems. So I'll give you some examples, but lines from week 9 on, Rad, pass rating, 84.4. That's 10th in the league. 250 yards per game. That's 30th. That's not very good, but I do have a reason for that kind of. 14 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. Okay, that's pretty darn good. 58.5% completion percentage. That was first in the league. And then also 32.6 attempts per game. That was more so for the yard fact. Point is, all those numbers look really darn good. And that included games against the Josh Allens and things like that. Everybody we played in the second half of the season, except for the yards per game.
The year before, we thought Jerry Jacobs was our best corner. We thought he was better than Amani, even though Amani had the interceptions. But we truly knew, because we was watching film and things like that, we knew Jacobs was our best corner. Okay. Okudah, if y'all know, like, I wasn't always the biggest fan of Okudah. I think he was always overrated, even coming out of the draft, because a good D-line can make a okay corner look good, okay? But I know the kid deal with injuries and things like that, but when we got Jacobs back, things kind of simmered down a little bit, because Amani was getting torched. Will Harris isn't the best corner, but he's just serviceable because he can play a lot of positions and things like that. So, yeah, the switch did flip. We got a little bit better. Kirby Joseph started coming into his own and things like that, from the Cam Suttons to Jacobs being fully healthy, going through offseason. Emmanuel Mosley bouncing back. We're getting T-Walk back. Kirby Joseph is now in his second year. Amani's now, not Amani, if he's now in his third year. CJ Gardner-Johnson, who I've been wanting for 2 seasons. And then you go get one of my favorite players in the draft, Brian Branch. This is what I'm most excited to see about this year's team, just because we've put a lot of money into it, draft into it. On paper, this is the best secondary we've had since I was a kid. Like, it's better than that. What was it? Chris Houston, Delmas. I can't even think of that secondary, but we had some goons in that secondary. Yeah. It's better than that Slade, Glover, Quinn secondary. Is it Hitabo? We had Quinn and Hitabo, Slade. I think it's better than that secondary. I think this can be the best secondary we've had in my lifetime, and I was born in the 80s, and we had some solid secondaries back in the 90s.
That ain't good, because I won't hit on his main notes here because it'll just be confusing, but it's kind of the point I touched on of, like, when you don't have like a reliable number 2, that's when things seem to kind of fall apart. So I was just looking back.
100%.
Start with the Saints. I think there's a good example here. So I talked about that Saints defense taking off in 2017. They had Marshawn Lattimore. He had a fantastic rookie season. And they had Patrick Robinson, who played at an elite level. And I think a big part of that was having that they had 2 really solid corners, out there. So they helped each other. But, and also some of that's the scheme. But you move forward to 2018. If that was a team, I'll put a stat to it. 2017, they allowed a 79 passer rating, 22 touchdowns to 20 interceptions. That was their defensive stats. 2018, they took a massive step backward. They allowed a 100+ passer rating, 30 touchdowns to 12 picks. Lattimore started to take a little bit of a step back. So what happened in that season? Patrick Robinson.
Apple. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, that's actually part of the story. So you were kind of on it. So Patrick Robinson gets hurt. And that's when they go out and trade for Eli Apple, because they didn't have a reliable number 2.
Apple.
But what I think though, Rad? I think there's like, they did it different because they went out and traded for a corner. I think it's because they they were winning. So I was like, let's go get the cornerback. For us, we were
Right.
just patient. We were like, oh, just wait for someone to get back here. We could have probably made a trade. I remember we talked about a couple corners, like, man, should we go trade for this guy? Like, I think William Jackson. I remember talking about him. We were saying we should go trade for a corner. They did hurt their defense that much. Us, on the other hand, we just kind of waited it out until Jerry got back. And that's why I bring up those stats, because they're legit. 2020, last year Aaron Glenn was there. The second lowest completion percentage, 20th worst yards per completion. 2019, 9th lowest completion percentage allowed, 15th in yards per completion. Okay, and also 20th in yards allowed. The thing that you notice with those stats, and they're similar to ours, we allowed a lot of yards, but the low completion percentage, the turnover plays, those types of things that you force.
And when you think about the Lions' coverage stats statistically and how they did improve through the second half of the season, the completion percentage was lower, but you had way too high of yards. The touchdown interception was better. Some of it was you got beat, as we'll take a look at. Other times you get these scheme breakdowns. So while part of it you love it, but there's also a lot of communication, a lot of things on the fly that go into it. So you have to have those pieces. PFF had us last year as the worst coverage team in the NFL, giving us a 48.8 grade, and that's of course beyond just secondary. That's linebackers. That's really every level defensively, because of all the inverted and different types of looks that you get. And I'm going to show you an inverted look here that the Lions had. We talk about that middle field presence with the linebacker position. The fact that the Lions would take Malcolm out of the game. They would put Chris Board in, who allowed 10 receptions on 14 targets, right? And you had guys like Jared Davis in at times at the linebacker position. But having that presence in zone coverage, guys that you can trust in zone coverage, but also sometimes that big nickel as well. But I was just doing some of the stats from this past season. Through the Miami game, the Lions allowed 25 20-plus yard completions. From Green Bay on, it wasn't much better. 30 completions of 20-plus yards. And that's not including run plays, of course. And the last two games, Chicago, they didn't allow one. Green Bay was 2. So I guess that's an upswing. Their third down percentage also got a lot better towards the end of the year. But what we know is Aaron Glenn, coming from New Orleans, he likes to blitz a ton on third down. And I don't know if that's necessarily going to change. As you see here, sometimes we just got beat on one-on-one. But I also thought the background of Fangio, who's not a big-time blitzer, but he's been a part of both, the way that he put it as, if you feel like you're forced to blitz, that's not a situation you want to be in. And I think the Lions did have leaned a little bit heavier towards the blitzing side, not necessarily because they can't get pressure, but because more leaning into that. Like, we can almost simplify it. Maybe we have less guys in the back end, but we're going to lean into, can we get Aiden Hutchinson one-on-one with these 5-man rushes that we're deploying more so in the second half of the season, right? Just to try to get people one-on-one. Hutchinson was double-teamed 30% of the time last season. That was tied for the most, essentially, with Myles Garrett. So to me, it wasn't necessarily just about, oh, Lions can't get pressure. I mean, of course, it helped when guys like Kaminsky got back, but also having the trust in the back end, leaning more a little bit to, let's simplify it. Now in the back end with those veteran pieces, you talk about limiting explosives, whether that's breakdowns or sometimes just getting beat, is going to be a key, I believe, for the Lions.
Much better on third down, and enforcing lower completion percentage. Like, you don't want teams completing 67% of passes on you. And the fact that the Lions were able to do that this past season, and that we've seen those Fangio defenses with the worst pass rush in the league be able to force those things, I think it's a reason for optimism. And then I can even point to the same example they did back when he was with Chicago. When he was with Chicago, he added Prince Amukamara on a 1-year, $7 million deal. I think that's somewhat similar to what Mosley got.
And to stay kind of on the veteran path from the cornerback and safety position, of course, linebacker, like we touched on, Bowman. But even if you go back to those San Francisco days, you take a look at a Dante Whitner. They had also brought over Bryce Callahan to Denver, who was with him with Chicago when he played well. You had a Kareem Jackson who was added as a veteran safety. So just having those vets in the back end.
And with the Denver Broncos, they had some young dudes in there. They had Ajamudia. They had Bryce Callahan, who was kind of a carryover with him. But then when they brought in Patrick Surtain, he also went out and got the number 2 vet. Kyle Fuller, he brought him over from Chicago. Ronald Darby, they signed that vet. It wasn't always about having the elite cornerback, because Lattimore didn't play at elite level these last couple of years. Like, he hasn't. He's played more of the middle kind of level.
Good, cool. Yeah.
All right. But it's been more so the fact that they have a legitimate number 2. And I think that's why, maybe they don't have that lockdown or like true number one. But what they have is they have 2 solid corners, and then they have a really smart slot. And that comes back to allowing you to play within the scheme, I think, a little bit more and open things up a little bit for what looks you can give, because his defense, Fangio's defense over years, has proven to be the most effective over the last few years in terms of coverage and all of those things. It's given a lot of teams problems, but you have to have the pieces that can do it.
I mean, you got me sold on it. I mean, I know what we about to do, but when you get to breaking it down like that, like, I get it, bro. Like, people don't get like it's all good having a true number one lockdown corner, but you got to have a solid number two because teams play matchup football. Okay, my one's gone. I'm gonna pick on this two guy. It's kind of like when an injury happens at DB. Where do you think the quarterback's about to throw it? That new corner that just came into the game. It happens. I mean, I'm keeping it simple for people. It happens like week in and week out. Like, okay, a corner gets hurt, they go straight to the guy that just came into the game. For one, his legs ain't warmed up, and for two, he ain't as good as the guy that was just got hurt because he obviously ain't beat him out and starting over. I feel like we finally have that. We got it in. Jerry Jacobs proved it. Your stats film proves that. And then we also got Mosley. And I'm telling you, I think Mosley, if he bounces back from that ACL, he's going to be our best corner. I'm just episode 2. I said it episode 1 and 2 now on Blue42.
I agreeing with you on that one.
Mosley will be our best corner.
That one. I mean, I'm
telling you, if he bounces back, bro, he's going to be our best corner. I'm telling y'all. And he will get re-signed. He's younger than Cam Sutton. They're going to lock both them boys in for the next 2 to 3 years. They'll be our starting 1 and 2. None against Jerry Jacobs. I like him. I love his story. I think he's tough. He's played some good football for us. But Mosley has proven that he can be a top-tier corner. I mean, he was on the Niners. The Niners had a top 3 defense in the NFL. And he was their best corner up until he got hurt.
The point made about Denver. So 2021, when they added those vet corners, they had Pat Surtain over there as well. That was the year they had that worst pass rush win rate and one of the lowest run stop rates, yet they only allowed 18.9 points per game. And that was the massive jump from the year before where they were allowing 28 points per game and they were 25th in the league. So that was a big jump that they had, was really just two reliable outside corners to what you just said. So you can't pick on one side or the other, because I think that's the big thing with this defense is like, yeah, you're going to have to handle some stuff one-on-one, but they're a lot about like playing, leverage and switching things off. And if you don't, the communication has been massive. I noticed, like, if you watch that Seattle Seahawks game, you could very quickly, like Mike Hughes, break down in coverage, guys wide open. And it's weird, but when you watch the Saints, there's a lot of communication, a lot of stuff going on, but guys are usually not running free. Like, there's way too many times last year. We look different. There's way too many times where Lions, there's people just running, and you're like, wait a minute, there's no one covering him. And I thought that was kind of normal. Then I started watching some of these elite defenses, and there's no one ever running free. There's always a safety right next to him, and there's always this guy covered by the linebacker. So it's like, you can't expose. It's almost like, to me, maybe not having like the star somewhere, right? You don't have like the best safety of all time, best corner or linebacker or even defensive end, but you don't have like a major hole that can be attacked because it's like,
we're solid everywhere.
Yeah, you can't put your big tight end on Jack Campbell, be like, he's too big for him. Like, you can't do that now, or you can't do that at cornerback at this point because we can throw a safety out. I always bring up the Seattle game. It was tough to see the way that we had to throw so many resources to play two receivers. It was like, dude, we don't have any numbers. It's like, we're throwing so many numbers. You shouldn't have to double team Tyler Lockett. Like, let's just be honest. I understand when Metcalf's in the slot while you need a safety over top. But if you're double teaming Tyler Lockett as well, you're gonna have a problem.
Right.
Running out of pieces.
It's not gonna match up well. Like, bro, I mean, look,
dude.
Even Goff has said, Jared Goff, our quarterback, has said he has seen a difference in that secondary. The windows are way tighter and smaller. When is week 1 start? Do we got a countdown on the days of week? I'm ready for week 1. That's what I'm ready for, dog. Bring them Chiefs on, and we're gonna do predictions later. I'm gonna be quiet.
Yeah. It's coming. It's coming. We're
I'm gonna stop because I think we might shock the world.
So I want to make. You see, now you buying in. I like that. This is a good episode because now you buying in. It's a little bit of longer.
Buying. I'm always buying in.
You're buying in a little bit more though. We talking Super Bowl now. I can feel it.
I bleed blue.
It's like a couple closing notes to what we hit on there to recap. One thing you said at the very beginning, I had wrote down. You said cover 6. I wrote down the split field coverages because that's what this defense does. If you there's actually statistics on it that Fangio defenses, they prefer zone over man. You hit on that. You read it off you just read it off the picture I sent you. That's cool. But you said that
wrong. Bro, put some notes up. Nobody can
I am not putting handwriting. People don't need to see that.
Chicken scratch. Stop playing. Man, where's my phone at? Let me.
Look.
Can I broadcast this somehow?
Okay, here are the 3 types of defensive players that you need for this type of defense. Athletic edge rushers. I think we got that, right? We got that with James and Hutch is a freakish athlete, that kind of thing. Okay, you got to have defensive backs to play the run. T-Walk, Gardner Johnson. I think it's more specifically the Cam Sutton, Mosley,
Ryan Branch. Mosley, all of them will tackle. Jerry Jacobs, they all tackle. Jacobs. That's one thing about Lions corners. Even Akuda, but he's gone. We will tackle. Go ahead.
Well, he had a rough one in there, but stout DTs. That's what we hit on at the beginning. Got to have style DTs. We have that. Talk about the top 2 high shell pre-snap, a lot of moving pieces. That's why you need high IQ players. The communication got to be on point because things are always moving around. Every team likes to motion now and all those kind of things. So the run fits are set up by how you're defending the pass. And I think that's just because it's a passing league. So the focus is there, but your run fits kind of play through that. And that's how you lead to the run defense. Because the real point I was trying to point out there is it's not about just adding playmakers to stop the run. It's about we talked about not adding Kalijah Cansey, and I was like, well, he's just small, so I don't know if the Lions will want that kind of piece. Clearly, they didn't want that kind of piece. They drafted a dude that's 330 pounds. They didn't go after 280. They went a completely opposite direction. Right. And I think that speaks even more to why this is what it's going to look like. Because they're like, dude, we can't put a 280 guy in there. He's going to have to handle some work. So we need the big dudes. Main points that I had, and then also, we get front looks. You hit on it earlier, right? You slant. Sometimes we slant defensively when we go to some of those, different looks where we go like the 5-1 looks. You got to have that off-ball linebacker that can handle blocks. So it's just things like that. I brought this up a ton. I want to make it clear. I know you watched a lot of the film too last year, right? We always played a lot of 2-eye and 3 technique. You know what I mean? Like one of our leads.
Yes.
And I was just like, why we keep doing? This is why I believe, because it's the responsibility you align that way. Like, so it's not necessarily like, your typical consistently just like head up 2 gap and kind of idea, right? So they're playing, I think, that gap and half style and that's why you see the lineup in those 2 eyes and 3 techniques consistently, because of what they're asking of those guys. They're not just, you watch them, they don't just directly rush up field. They're not shooting gaps, but at the same time, they're not just standing there going like this. That weird little marriage between the two. And I think that's exactly what the Lions are building towards. And I think hopefully this whole episode, by what Brad wrote down, what I talked about, like, maybe put in perspective on how we think those pieces can fit together and what puzzle we're trying to make. The puzzle we're trying to build here. Because if you don't know what puzzle you make, you're just putting pieces together. It's gonna look
right. We're trying to put a puzzle together where we're at least top 15 defense.
That's a good way to do
it. And I think that's all we truly need.
That's all we needed for
top
years.
15 defense.
Top 15 defense.
And if our offense plays like they did last year, which I think they'll be better, and you add a top 15 defense and we have a kicker that we know that can make field goals, bro, we're playoff bound. Like,
there it is.
It's that easy. I don't think it's like that hard, because offense has proven that they're going to put up points. And we talked about this last year, like on paper, bro, but even before the draft, like we can put up points with anybody in the NFL.
You said
then
that.
we go out and make these draft picks, boom, 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 boom. And we showed that we can put up points with the Eagles, the Buffalo Bills. It didn't matter who it was. Yep. We can go point for point. We just got to get off the field on 3rd down and force people to punt. And we need to make field goals in late game situations. No, I'm going to be real. If we had a field goal kicker last year, all season, we make the playoffs, though. Say we bring Jason Hanson out of retirement and get him kicking.
Man. Hey, look, man, I'm down. We can bring in, like, we can just keep trading for kickers, man. I'm cool with it.
Go get Prater.
I got no issue bringing in tons of kickers. Is he
just go get Prater?
He got to be on somebody's team, man.
I don't know. I think he's still with Arizona, but I never wanted Prater to leave. Him and I told you I'm big on special teams. Him and Jamal Agnew, I never wanted to leave.
Yeah, Agnew was fire. But Khalif's been a dog.
He has.
Badgley was pretty good last year.
And we got Bagley, and then we brought in a XFL kicker. Am I tripping?
Yeah.
So
Romo.
John we're gonna see.
John
Parker. We're gonna see. I'm going with, first off, his name's John, and he got the last name Romo. I'm going with him.
Oh, no, so you're a Romo guy. You're a Romo guy.
You like Tony Romo.
You like the CBS broadcast. That's what you're saying.
I think Tony Romo is the best NFL broadcaster out right now.
I like him too, man. People be hating on him. I think
Tony Romo is the best broadcaster. Secondly, I think Tony Romo is one of the most underrated quarterbacks of all time because he was a dog to me. Answer the last question.
What was the last question?
Shout out to everybody sending in emails, bro. Questions, please continue to send them in to Blue42. The email is DoseBgaming@gmail.com. Send in your questions and we will answer them on every episode we do on Blue42 podcast. Yeah.
there you go. This last one comes from my guy 9 Drinks. Shout out to 9 Drinks, man.
Oh yeah. I know 9 Drinks. He be in the chat. What's up?
Yeah,
what's up?
I don't know if I feel like I met 9 Drinks. I don't know, but Dose, I have heard a lot about you going to school to potentially be a scout, which is, great idea.
Facts.
I like how he put the dots in. That was good. Maybe you could give us some insight on what you're learning and how you're doing. I thought this was perfect for years ago. Hey, just a thought. No, I appreciate that 9 drinks. Probably noticed that certificate back there, right? I know you noticed that.
I seen it with the little is it a gold ribbon or a little gold star?
Gold star.
Right,
No.
right there.
Oh, this.
What's that?
I
Yeah,
don't know. It's just like a logo.
that's your certificate, but it has a gold star. I noticed it.
That's my football GM and scouting certificate. So there we go. No, but so yeah, I worked with I don't know if I should put that out there. I did a video scouting job last year. I don't know if I should put that out there. And we're kind of just working through it. But I am going back to school. I'm going back to school. So starting this fall, I'm enrolled in, what do they say, in university? That's how people say it. That's what I'm doing. I'm doing that this year. So
DeVry, you're in DeVry. You're going to University of DeVry? Online schooling?
DeVry. No, I don't know what that is.
Okay, too young for that. That was like
no, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is.
I got my degree from DeVry. Like it was an online school back in the day in the 90s when people was watching Jerry Springer. That was one of the commercials. Go ahead, bro.
I only know about Phoenix Global. No, Purdue
you're
Global,
going to Phoenix? Yeah.
No. See, I did look there. I looked there first. I was thinking about doing it online, but then I decided, I want to have a couple on campus because it's not
University of Michigan.
Not University of Michigan. It's a little expensive.
A little far.
It's also a little out of state for me too, so I ain't messing with that. Just I'm staying in state, and I took class there in high school. I'm going to hey, they got a couple people drafted this year.
Bowling Green.
Bowling Green. Carl Brooks got drafted.
Are you really going to Bowling Green?
I'm going back. Yep.
I guessed it.
There it is. See, all right, man.
Hey,
Rad grew up here. You already know.
Rad did not grow up there. Rad grew up in Michigan and Oklahoma. But hey, man, shout out to Dose. Being a scout, going back to school. He's gonna be a scout one day.
That's the plan.
Did you watch Inside the Den of the Life of a Scout yet? Please. You still haven't, bro. I've told you twice to watch this. Like, bro, it shows you like in depth what a scout's life is like.
Okay, but you got to realize, like, I've talked to them, so I kind of like have an idea. I should watch it.
This is dope. And you watch a Lion Scout. Like, they're on the road 24/7, bro. You don't get back to your hotel room to 3 a.m.
I mean, I definitely need to check it out. But that's the goal, man. That's the goal. That's just what we're trying to get to.
That's dope. Love it.
All right, man.
Shout out to 9 Drinks for the question.
I appreciate it. Send your emails in. Brad, last thoughts. Wrap this thing up, man.
I ain't got any thoughts, man. I'm ready to get down to episode 3. You heard? Blue42 podcast. Make sure y'all check us out on all platforms. Yeah.
And we out, man.
Ribbit. 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 Ribbit.